Navigating the road to success in the entertainment industry can be daunting, but we're here to help keep you centered, undetoured, navigating the artist's journey. My next guest is an Atlanta-based musician. Seth Waters has played at venues such as the Hollywood Bowl and other arenas. He shared the stage with the Zac Brown Band, Robert Cray, Robert Randolph, Lyle Lovett, and many more. Seth averages over 120 live performances per year. As a music educator, he's taught private lessons to a selection of Atlanta's professional musicians. Several of his students have gone on to study music on a full-ride scholarship. Seth's passion for all things music is infectious, and he's constantly seeking musical growth and knowledge. Let's drop in on the conversation I had with him at the end of last year. I'm so glad you guys have stopped by and taken the time to just slow down and come to Base Camp and listen with us again. Today, I'm so honored to speak with multi-talented musician who can play multiple instruments, has toured so much and even played at the Hollywood Bowl, Seth Waters. Welcome, Seth, to Base Camp.
Appreciate that, Sloan. Thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to talk to you today because you and I had talked recently about what goes into the energy and the mindset of being a full-time artist. And you've been so blessed to be able to do it full-time since 2011, right?
That's right.
Excellent. Yeah. And I wanted to know at that turning point in 2011, or maybe it was 2010, where you were like, I am fed up with just living so small in my life and not going for that leap, and what fear might have been present for you at that time, and kind of the mindset shift that you were able to go through. And walk me through a little bit of that back to way before the pandemic. Obviously, I know things shifted again in the pandemic, but way before that, if you could just kind of walk me through what went on in 2010, 2011, that you're like, okay, I'm going to do this full time no matter what.
Sure. So I had been working in restaurants for the longest time, and it was a good thing in some ways, but I have a theory that everybody has a timer that starts running the first day they work in a restaurant. And for some people, it runs out in a year or two. Some people, it runs out in decades. But
mine, it was 1 week.
Right.
I stayed 1 week at a place in Vinings, and it actually happened to be 2001, right as the planes hit the towers. I was actually at work when it happened, and I was like, oh my God, this is awful. What am I doing with my life? Life is too short. I don't need to be doing this. And I quit the next day.
Totally. So your timer, lucky for you, was set pretty short, right? My timer, I think, probably took 8 years or something like that to go off, and I loved my time there. I met my wife working in restaurants, and so there's definitely still something to show for it. But anyway, I totally burned out and was working for a person who really didn't have it in her to be nice to people that work for her. And that and several other factors contributed to me hitting a wall and going, I have to make a change. I can't do this for a living anymore. And I made that decision first, which was I have to do something else. And then I went ahead and quit because I knew I had to hold myself accountable. I had just like take a leap of faith. And then
did you have a conversation with your Crystal or anyone that's your significant other, your wife now? Did you have a conversation with her at the time, or was this
absolutely many conversations leading up to it of just misery and moaning and groaning, and eventually deciding to take action, and she's so cool that she would be supportive of me no matter what I chose, so she was surely behind me. So I went ahead and quit. And then I was like, well, okay, genius, like, what are you going to do now?
So you had no plan. You just
No.
quit, and had nothing lined up the next day.
Oh, as you do in like your mid-20s, you just do silly stuff sometimes without thinking about it. And so
even older sometimes, because I know I quit without any plan from an employer that could have been nicer to our employees as well. And
Well, you know
Yeah.
what a weight off it can be then to just make that call and do it.
Oh my God, I was terrified. And the thing was about it was we always make very specific decisions over milkshakes. That's the thing that Scott and I do. And so usually, and this goes back to his youth, he would like, they would make major decisions to move like states and stuff like that. And it would always be over a milkshake. So, but it wasn't a milkshake this time. It was over sushi and some sake, probably a good deal of sake at the time. I did drink a little bit of alcohol at the time. And yeah, I was terrified. I was crying. I didn't, the people were like, are you okay? You want dating? Isn't sushi's not good? And I'm, no, the sushi's fine. It's
Yeah, but you find in a situation like that where you're unhappy with your job, you feel like you're not even who you should be. Like regardless of what the circumstances are that are going on around you, the externalities, the internality stuff is that's where the real problem, the root of it is like I'm not the person I want to be in this scenario, so I have to extricate myself from it.
and let's just touch on that for a second. So the person who you wanted to be and this who you are was, at odds with each other. Did that externally manifest in anything that you kind of regret now? Like, did you have to cope and have coping mechanisms that probably weren't as healthy, or what exactly
Sure.
happened?
And the unhealthy coping mechanism is always an ongoing thing for me, myself, and most people, right? It's like we rarely do we do the right thing to cope. Um, and it's something that I still am working on. I think a lot of people are. But yeah, at the time it was just like you come home from work and you're a basket case, which is really what it was for me. And it's like I really need to be coming home and trying to be one half of a relationship, right? And not just like unload on somebody else my misery, and I think that's part of what really kind of pushed me in the direction of I've got to make this change, because like I'm saying, it's like I'm not who I want to be to myself and to my wife and et cetera, and the people around me, right? I don't view myself as an unhappy person, right? But then suddenly you find that I found that I was unhappy. So it's like, okay, I've got to make a change. So anyway, I kind of jumped ship there, and then it was like I said, it was like, okay, genius, what are you gonna do now? And it was like, well, I've been paid to play music in the past, and it's something that I feel like I'm good enough at to have been paid to do it. So what if instead of doing that, once a month, what if I did that a few times? What if I could find a way to do that a few times a week, right? And try to somehow replace the miserable money I was making in the restaurant business with some happier money, maybe even a little less, but at least I'll be enjoying what I'm doing. So that's kind of the initial, the start of it all, right? Which is, and people have asked me about it before, and they say, well, how did you come up with a plan to do this? And it's like there really was no plan. There was just an idea. There's an initiation, there's a beginning, and then you just kind of start walking and you work it out as you go.
See, I think that's so important. And I think as listeners, hopefully anyone who might be listening to this will get that sometimes the intention is more important than the instruction or the first step. That if you feel it strong enough in your heart and you feel that this is what I'm meant to do, this is, your voice or your instrument that you're meant to share with the world and your experience, because we're all put here on earth, I feel, to share our experience and our talents. And whatever that is, I feel like a lot of us have been living so small because society has told us, oh, you got to have the right job, or parents tell you you have to have, a decent job. And it just comes ingrained in artists from an early age. Oh, you can't, rock the boat too much. You can't be too different, or you can't like follow that passion too much because you have to be pragmatic and capable in your life and be an adult. But sometimes like that's what holds us back. That's the self-limiting belief. So what you did is you just broke through that self-limiting belief. And I love it because you didn't have a plan. You just had that heart intention. And that, I feel, is sometimes the most important and almost the scariest step for people, to take.
100%. Yeah, having to be at odds with the expectations of the people around you, right? Whether it's your family and again, even yourself, right? Like knowing, well, I'm leaving this thing and I'm giving up what level of financial stability I've been able to foster in this one thing. Now I'm going to throw that away and also potentially disappoint loved ones who really they care about me and they want me to be doing well, and then they see you make a decision like that, which may seem rash at the time. And yeah, so you're kind of like flipping the expectation over on all these people, not to mention just the pure fear of the unknown that you're going through on your own. It's, all of these other people and forces in your life are expecting one thing of you and you go and do the other thing.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to be in that holiday household, like that next holiday, when you're with everyone and you've just, made this decision and you're so excited and you're like, I'm gonna do this. And that next holiday, they're like, and so what are you doing? and did you have that like experience at that holiday gathering? Because I feel like a lot of times as artists and actors, they're like every holiday, it's like, oh, so what are you auditioning for
Oh,
now?
it's so
What are you
bad.
working on
It's like,
now? Like that's your
oh, do you
validation as
still
a
have your
human
little
being.
band?
Yes,
Yeah.
your little band. I love how people put little on everything to make like they don't mean it, but they're like being as like demeaning as they can, and they love you. It's great.
Oh,
I love my parents. I love my family, but yeah.
but it's just hard for them. We're inside of this all the time, every day, and we understand that there's a language that we speak about it, right? There's a way to go about talking about this stuff, and for the most part, our family and to some extent our peers that were there before all this, they just lack the vocabulary to really talk about it the way that we talk about it. So you have to be super patient with them when they're like, so you still doing the music thing? I'm like, yeah, it's only my life's work. Like,
I've only studied my whole life, put countless hours of training into, and blood, sweat, and tears, literally. But yes, yeah,
yeah,
no, I love that because it's funny when I tell people, that I'm a multi hyphenate and I do all these things. Oh, I wanted to do drama in high school.
right.
I wanted to be an actor in high school. And I bet I could get back into it. So you think I have a good voice? I could probably do voiceovers, something like that. I'm like, yeah, you don't understand how many classes I'm in a week. Like it takes 20 years to be an actor.
And it seems like so low level dismissive that people think that I could just do what you're doing.
Yeah. Can you teach me if I had an afternoon with you?
Sure.
I'm
But
sorry,
again,
I do a Southern voice every time. I don't mean to.
that's
It's
who
not
that
that
person
it
is.
has nothing to do with Southerners being stupid or anything. I'm from the South. We're both living here in the South right now. We're in Georgia. I love Southerners.
I'm a Southerner born and raised.
Same here in North Carolina, but my family's from New York, so I feel like, if I'm like going into that rude speak, I'm always going to go into a New York accent.
Right? Yeah, that you're right about that.
So you quit, you had no plan and you went for it. You now in our industry we have agents that kind of help garner the gigs and you audition and you book them or you don't book them. But for you it was a lot of hustle. So tell me what like that next week looked like and what was your dip? Did you have a dip moment like that said, "Oh no, I can't do this. I have to go back to waiting tables," or what how did you go for that dip?
I never really, luckily, never really. Well, I take that back. Um, what really happened was I went back to a restaurant that I had been working at years previous, where I met my wife, who you're friends with, and I went back there, and they were willing to take me on just part time, some flexible work where I could work a couple of days a week as I was trying to kind of transition, right? So in some ways, I kind of had to like go back on my promise to myself immediately, right? Because reality hits and the bills show up at the end of the month, and you're like, well, I've got to find a way to be able to transition into this life that I want for myself, right? I couldn't, and I think there's a trope about actors waiting tables, right? Like this is people have to find part-time work in order to transition into this thing. So luckily, I was able to do that. I probably did that for better part of a year or so, and in all my remaining free time, it was like, okay, I need to go through this big town of Atlanta and find places that are paying people to perform live music there. And it was I still have like these old documents in my computer, which are, 4 computers later or whatever. And it's so funny to look through these things and look through these like names and phone numbers and compiling this big list of places where I can go try to start making a living. And
I
The
love that. So you created an actionable database, and from there you could like go in and action step, talk to them, and then like follow up if you needed to, and you could
right.
see
You
where
can make
you booked, and then you could see like your steps. So small wins begin to add up and avalanche into big wins, and that's what we talk about. Like
yeah.
taking those small actionable steps that you can do. Oh my gosh, I wonder if you can share this document at all or some
Well,
template of this document with the listeners because I think this would be so great.
yeah, if I remember, it's a pretty simple idea, right? There's a phone number, maybe an email address. There's definitely a name of maybe who did I talk to, and in the in the music booking thing, it's always like somebody who doesn't want that job ends up getting that job at the restaurant. They're just like, okay, now it's my job to book the music. So you've got to figure out who that person is, and I'm sure this is different in different areas of the art world, but you've got to figure out who your contact is. Who do you need to be talking to, and try to get around the people that are of no help,
And
which
it's all about solving their problem. Like they need talent, they need it to be diverse. Every week, it's nice to go to a restaurant and have a different band. That's what's an allure. Like we went out the other night to a restaurant and I didn't realize it, but they had a live artist playing guitar. And I was like, oh, wow, this is kind of cool. And, the boys are like, can we give them money? Can we just put money in the thing? I'm like, of course you can. Let me, I just have cash on me for just this kind of thing. I'd have it for like when I'm out and about and see someone that may need it or whatever. And so they were able to feel good and give them money. And I thought, well, that's cool that they had like, I didn't even realize they were having that. I didn't go to the restaurant for that purpose, but it was
right,
added to the experience. And I'm sure that is really important to solve that person's problem.
right, and what you're talking about. We're talking about the musical middle class are the people who are doing these kinds of gigs, right? This is not really like a destination artist most of the time, right? They're hired on to provide a musical backdrop for what's going on in the restaurant or the coffee shop or you name it, right? So this is a really important piece of kind of the gig and art economy. Are these like quote unquote middle class jobs, which the art community needs this stuff, right? They're not glamorous, but they're necessary, for us to make a living.
I'm a character actor and it's like that equivalent. I can do a lot of different character things kind of like I can change my voice and accents, and this year alone I've gotten to do some amazing, fun accent work, and I equate it to that. Like I am solving someone's problem. I am like a portion of this puzzle piece, and I'm fitting in where they need me to. I'm not obtrusive. I'm just going in, doing my job, getting out. and,
Right.
and it's great. I love it. It's like it parlays into other work.
Yes, absolutely. And you can find like real joy in being the peg that fits into that hole for somebody else, right? When you find that you have perfectly solved somebody's problem for them, they love you for it and they tell other people that you did that. Right, and that's what's so important is that you think that these things are unglamorous or whatever in the moment, but the more you walk in the door with like if you take your arena attitude to the coffee house gig, and I mean that in the best way of saying your arena attitude, right? Like bring 150%. If you treat all those gigs the same way, the people who hire you take notice of that and they tell the other people who hire people what a nice job you did, and it's worth, giving everything your all in every moment.
I love that. Like just living life blissfully or enjoy is just going to bring so much more of that energy back to you too. Because if you're not enjoying it and you're just doing it because like, oh, I don't really want to be here, but I'm going to do this because it is a musical gig, then like that you can totally like hear that, you can feel that it's palpable, and you're not going to get that job back again because
Right.
it's just going to be completely like just baseline mundane. But I love what you said about bringing your arena attitude to the coffee house gig, or just bringing your Oscar winning moment, I guess you could say, to your work as an actor or whatever it is. That's really cool.
Yeah, I think we can say it for both fields. Just leave it all on the stage, right? Don't take anything back off the stage with you. Leave it all there.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So,
I think with a lot of times, this doesn't mean, though, for actors, and I guess I should qualify this doesn't mean that if you're, hired, a lot of times we're hired for like U5 roles where it's like 5 lines and under. That's what a U5 would be. And and you're just there to serve the story's purpose, to get the lead actor to something, or describing what they'll be doing, or you're just a part of their process in a small way. It doesn't mean that you're going to make a meal out of that scene. We don't need anyone to be making meals out of their U5 scenes because you want to have your Oscar winning moment. There's a time and a place for all of that. But obviously, if you are in a situation where you get to have that wonderful chance to emote and to really be in a way that is affecting the scene and a little bit more, then take the time to go through that process and know how you're going to get there, because you're going to have to do it, especially for actors. They're going to have to do it at least 10 or 12 times from different angles, different camera, setups, be it their close up or their wide or their medium. So just being able to be in that technique class, and being able, like, and same with musicians, being able to know your technique and know it's spot on, so that as soon as you're ready and you're called up to bat, you are ready to go, and you can cry on that dime if you need to 15 different times in the exact wonderful authentic way, or play that meaningful song in that exact way.
Yeah, I'm glad that you made that clarification, because what we say in the music business is serve the song, right? And it's like, and you can make that serve the scene or serve the gig, whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing. You want to do the best version of that, not be all over the top and schmaltzy. It's tempting to do that. I mean, especially when you mention technique, right? Like, the more you have technique in anything, the more tempted you are to use it.
Yeah.
And like, having the restraint to back off of that stuff if you're in a U5 role, or you're supposed to be playing like down jazzy, music for dinner, right? You want to respect that expectation that is being made of you, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess you would learn this on the front end when you're hustling the gig. You're able to know, okay, this is this kind of restaurant. I know that I need to play in this tone. And for us, that would translate to making sure, even on your video game auditions, or your voiceover auditions, or your on-camera auditions, always research the tone of the show.
Mhm.
Always know that the show that you're going for, whether it's someone that's a fast-paced show like back in the day, the Gilmore Girls, and then Amy Sherman Palladino wrote Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, one of my favorite shows. So you know that when you're going into that audition, everyone's going to be talking about this fast, and you just need to keep up, and you need to be able to do that, but be very articulate when you're doing it too. So, versus something that's a more simple tone, or like an understated tone, versus, a more outlandish tone, like some of the comedies, broad comedies. So that's really interesting that you said that. I didn't know that pertained to music as well, but it makes sense.
Yeah, and I think part of what we're talking about is like, it being relatively easy to get the call, but it's a lot harder to get the call back. And I think
Hmm.
what we're talking about, like, these are things that you can do to get the call back, right? I can get my foot in the door and get booked on the thing once, but like, what am I going to do to make sure that I get to do this again? Because in my business, it's like, these are things that they repeat, right? They're happening weekly, monthly, bi-weekly, whatever, and these are going to continue happening with or without me, and I would rather them be happening with me at the end of the day. So what am I going to do to keep the gig?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the same thing with us. There's like 500 people up for a role. They're seeing your small thumbnail. They click on it, several hundred of those a day, and you get the chance to audition. And what do you need to do to make sure even though you might not book that gig, but you're booking the room, you're booking,
Mhm.
your career. You're not just booking that job, you're booking it for the longevity, because this is, again, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that. That's really what this is. And in the beginning, you have to treat it like a sprint, but you realize that you're wrong, and that, I guess, if you want anything to be sustainable, you have to treat it like a marathon, right? It's what's really remarkable is being able to do this for a long time. It's Anybody can do it for a short amount of time and burn out or fail, or some combination of the two, but it's the marathoners that really get to get the joy out of this thing, as it starts to work, as you start to book more things. And not only that, but I'm sure it's the same in your field, is like, collaborate with the people that you want to collaborate with, right?
Yeah.
If you're working with the people that you want to work with, that's where I think the true joy of it really starts.
Yeah. And so finding your tribe, how did you find that tribe when you were first starting out? Because there might be people listening that they're like, I want to do this, but I don't know how to find that tribe of people that I can just create with. Because again, as you know, we can't just wait for auditions to come to us. We have to be creating, we have to be content creating, or creating music, or creating partnerships and strategic alliances all across the board, so that we can be doing a lot of different things in this industry. So how did you do that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting story. I plugged into music in a weirdly in like a single port at and this is like my last year working in the restaurant business. I had my wife and I, Crystal, went out to a local bar and we were dressed up. It was Halloween, and I was dressed up like Slash, and I had a guitar and the wig and the hat and everything. And there was a band playing, and I got entered in. I was a finalist in the costume contest, and I asked the guitarist in the band, like, "Hey man, do you mind if I plug into your amplifier?" When they, because it's like an applause based thing, so right, so when they go for my applause thing, it'd be nice if I could play something to kind of solidify the costume.
I
and
love that.
and you know, I it's always a big ask, asking another musician who you don't know, hey, can I plug into your thing? And he was very cool about it and let me do it. And then after I won the costume contest, which was awesome, and he ended up, oh, you can actually play a little bit, you want to do a couple of songs with the band. So I do a few songs with the band and we play, a few numbers or whatever.
So
And
you had never played with this band before. You just kind of like got up there.
yeah, just got up there and kind of improvised through whatever they were doing.
So
And
important. Improv is so important. I didn't realize how important it was with you guys too, but it's so important on our end.
oh,
Love improv. I'm always telling people go take improv. It's
yeah,
great for video game auditions. It's great for voiceover. It's great for on camera. There's so many times where I've gotten to improv my own lines and they kept it in.
oh, totally. Let's put a pin in this because I want to come back to improvisation. It's so
Yeah,
important.
so important.
So anyway, he let me play, and then we get done, and I'm talking to him for a while, and we exchange information, and then like this is before I quit the restaurant thing, and then like several months later, I quit the restaurant thing, and I reached out to him, and I said, hey man, I'm looking for work, and I can play guitar, bass, and just let me know if anything pops up. And sure enough, he had a gig that he was trying to leave because he had found a different gig, and he plugged me into this band, and I started working with them. And in that band, I met our good friend Marshall Coates. I met all kinds of like
Love Marshall.
oh, I met so many, and this was a band that like had a lot of different Atlanta musicians kind of coming in and out. Every chair in the band is probably 3 or 4 deep, but you kind of put the band together as availability allows. And so I met all these great people, and then I started bands with some of those people, and then met other people, and it's like it all came from this single weird serendipitous entry point into meeting this one guy in this one place, and then he plugged me into somebody else, and then that person plugged me into 5 more people, and then suddenly you can see how the pyramid starts to kind of form, and suddenly 100 people in town who you can work with or ask for work, or they can ask you for work or whatever. And it's amazing to try to realize when opportunity is shoving you around. It's you have to notice those moments, I guess.
Well, and I don't know that it was necessarily shoving you around, but you were definitely going with the flow, like you were in your flow at that point. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping that everyone gets from this podcast, is to find those moments in your life that synchro destiny, or your opportunity meeting your very, very skilled technique. So we shouldn't just say people go in with no technique and do something like what you did, but that you had the technique and you met that opportunity, and it's synchrodestiny. And then from there, that flow and that energetic flow was able to take hold because you had no self-limiting beliefs. You just opened yourself up to the possibility of, what if I was able to be able to be a musician full time? What if I was able to find an amazing group of friends to play with that I can have relationships with, 11 years later now? And I just think that's amazing.
Yeah, you've got to be open to it. I know, and that's kind of a cliche, right? But you've got to be ready when things start to happen, and because they will. If I believe that, like if it's like you were saying earlier, it's like you're kind of put here to bring your talent to the world, and if your talent is worth sharing, avenues to share it will open.
Absolutely. I believe God has put every single person, or whatever higher source you believe in, has put every single person on this earth for a reason. And it's to share their experience with others, and be it through your art, through being a musician, through performing arts, through, teaching, whatever it is. And you teach too, which is amazing. So not only are you playing out, it seems like quite a bit, quite like hundreds of gigs a year, but you find the time to give back. And that's what's so important as well. Is I teach as well, and I feel like it's so important to give that energy back, to let the elevator go back down, and grab those people and bring them up, because as we know, all ships rise when we're teaching.
I love that. I love that elevator going down analogy. And to me, I wasn't, the teaching thing started as kind of a means to an end, right? It was the beginning, and I was like, well, I just got to find more ways to make a living at this. And I kind of started teaching, and you find out, like, it's pretty humbling when you start doing something you've never done before, because you go, oh, whoa, wait a minute, I'm not very good at this. And you find yourself kind of hitting a wall, and you go, uh-oh. And then,
Yes.
yeah,
As I said, I was never going to teach. I'm like, no, there's no way I'm going to teach. And then when I do it, I feel like I learn more, or just as much, in each of the sessions as anyone that I'm working with, because
oh,
you
cool.
learn about yourself, and you learn about your capacity for growth, and your capacity for just giving to others too.
Well, what's amazing about teaching is that, like, you think that you know something inside and out, and maybe you do, but the way in which you know it is purely nonverbal and instinctual, right? And as soon as you have to convert that instinctual knowledge to verbal knowledge to give to someone else, it really deepens your understanding of the subject matter. And music is so like that. It like woke me up one day after I'd been teaching for years and years, and like kind of, gradually got a little better at it, and things all obviously become more joyful when you don't suck at them. And it's like, you gain this totally new understanding of your subject matter, and the music, which is kind of the love of my life in some ways. It helped me know it in a much better way, just having to teach, into so many different types of people, right? Every person you teach is different, so your teaching method can't be the same for everybody.
Right, because their energy that they're bringing to it is different, or they're coming from different circumstances and different ages. So that makes sense. You have to kind of amend how you teach and your style for each one, so that you're able to connect with them on a deep level that they're going to want to continue. Because again, it's just like the gig. They could say, oh, I don't need to do this next month.
Right. And it's like, you have to maximize the amount of light bulbs that you can turn on for people. Because that's where the real joy in teaching is for me, is like watching somebody's eyes light up because they get it. Whether it's the most basic lesson one, or we're 5 years into this thing and we're doing advanced stuff, just watching that light bulb come on, that's what keeps bringing me back.
That's amazing. I love the eyes light up moment, because just like anything, when a kid gets on a bike, or you learn that piano piece and you're able to do it without like looking at your fingers or something like that, that muscle memory has to be literally just such a weird brain synopsis that happens. I'm really, really into how neural pathways cross in order to create a muscle memory. So for example, with doing accents, I love doing accent and dialect work, and it's like statistically proven you really have to do it like almost every other day, or every day be running your springboards of like your accents and dialects, because if you don't, the areas in which your tongue is placement for the different accents will just, that memory will fall away. But if you do it every day, on the opposite end, if you're doing it daily or weekly, those muscle memories will start to really like solidify in such a way that you can just snap your finger and go right into any accent you want. And I think it's fascinating what happens in the brain to make that happen. Because I always had like a speech impediment as a kid, and I was really self-conscious with it. I actually had a teacher that said, yeah, you're not going to really be an ingenue. I had a lot of teachers that kind of talked down to me, mostly my size. Like they're just, I'm very, very short. I'm like 4'9", and they always talk down like, oh, you're so cute, but you're not gonna do this or you're not gonna do that probably. And I remember having that lisp, and I was like, I have to correct this. I have to figure out how, what am I doing that makes it this way. And of course my parents were like, oh, you're fine, you sound fine, you don't need any lessons. So they didn't ever advocate for me doing it, so I had to do it on my own. So I was like obsessed with like, okay, where's my tongue placement now? But that muscle memory, getting back to what you said with like those aha moments, is just so important. Just working at it weekly.
Yeah, that is so fascinating. I never would have thought of like accent work as physical chops, but
Oh yeah.
I guess it is. It's really using your musculature in the right way.
And
Huh.
your breath work and your nasality or non-nasality. There's so much that goes into like this area as a whole. Like I'm just learning so much more about just all this area. Like I've always massaged this area for people because, I'm a massage therapist as well. And I find it fascinating when I let go of these muscles on people, how much they're able to better articulate, they're able to have less headaches, they're able to, just even think clear, because all of this, if it's all tight and constrained. So yeah, there's also that element too, that you have to be able to do the vocal warm-ups in order to get to the accent work. There's so much that goes along with it.
And that's amazing. That might bring us to like a good pivot about like kind of taking care of yourself physically while doing the kinds of work that we're talking about, right?
Yes, yes. So what do you do? What do you do to take care of yourself physically? Because you're kind of like always over the guitar, or you're in a Zoom and over a guitar or a piano or whatever,
Well,
drums.
lately I've been coming to see you for massage, which has been massively helpful. Um, but
Thanks.
previous to that, it's really just, I mean, you've got to exercise, you've got to stretch, you've got to be kind of like body conscious, because these are, I mean, in the music thing it's fairly demanding. It doesn't seem like it is, but it's like the repetitive nature of it, I think, is what makes it kind of dangerous for you, right? Certain areas become super problematic over time. And that kind of goes back to what you have said about technique. You have to refine your technique. Because I mean, the way I describe technique to my students is like it's the same thing that weightlifters do and don't do, right? It's the technique is the thing that you do so you don't hurt yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. I think a lot of people forget that. They're like, oh, I just want to, do this part of it. But the people who I see who are extremely successful take care of every aspect of that balance, mind, body, soul. They're doing either yoga or they're working out, be it walking or running or something like that. I love to swim personally or hike, and just getting out in nature and taking care of the mind that way. Being able to just be in nature is really calming so that you can just de-stress. And so that's a super important element that you brought up, that it doesn't seem like we are athletes, but this is our instrument.
Yeah, you've
This
got to
is
take
our,
care of it. It's like to me, I think about it like a vehicle or a car, right? It's like you have to maintain the thing, and like you're saying, there's like the physical maintenance, there's the spiritual maintenance, mental well-being. There's all these kind of pieces that have to fit together for you to do your work effectively. And that you can look at that from a number of different points of view, right? Effectively, like, did I book the gig? Or effectively, did I make good art? Or there's all these different ways that you can look at it. But if all of your cylinders aren't firing, you're gonna start to lag.
yeah. And I feel like when all the cylinders are firing, you most likely don't remember what you did. For example, in auditions, if you have an amazing audition, I have no clue what I did to book that. I just like was there. I was present. I was listening. I was just there. And those are the ones I book. I mean, it's almost like, fuck it, I'm just
Yeah,
going to do
yeah.
this. And
I,
like, and then you book it and it's like, oh, wow, that was way too easy. Why don't I do that for all of them?
Yes,
You know?
exactly. Well, I love that, and that kind of goes back to what we started to say about improvising, right? It's the best. My favorite way of playing is improvising, right? It's kind of what I really have glommed onto, kind of from the beginning. I just
Because it's play. It's play. It's like brings you back to the sandbox. It's like you're a kid in a sandbox playing with other kids.
yeah, it's where you can just discover, and you don't know what's going to happen, and there's so much fun in that. But the moments where I feel I've done my best improvising is always, it's like nearly like this out of body thing that happens. You just kind of go away in these moments, and because you're away, you're out of your own way, right? And all of your like hang-ups and ego nonsense kind of steps aside and allows you to kind of channel and do your best work. And one of my biggest, goals in my musical life is to earn access to that place in an active way. It's a place that, it's when you get there, you often find that you got there passively, and maybe some set of conditions kind of lined up for you to get there. But meditation, I think, is an important part of this. But like, yeah, how can I train myself to access that space on demand?
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when you're in it, you just have no clue of what you did to get there, that it's hard to write down an actionable plan for the next time or anything. But one thing that I found, I mean, you can't make an action plan like, what did I just do?
No, not for
But
not for a mysterious phenomenon.
Right, right. But one of the things that I feel like helps me though is just being quiet and being in a meditational place, either out in nature or swimming really does it for me, like I said, or just laying down and meditating to a guided meditation. And I do these actually for people. So if anyone's ever interested, I can help you with that. But I feel like those are so important to just be in the gap and just like kind of find your way into that gap between thoughts. And so that your body can just kind of take on that sense of like energy that it's all okay. Everything's flowing the right way for me. Can manifest anything I desire, and it comes to me easily and quickly. And the art comes to me. And even if I'm not creating art, I'm still an artist. I'm still valid. I'm still important. I'm still worthy of my voice being heard. And I know a lot of us went through that just recently, and we're still going through it with the pandemic. And I know that's something I wanted to ask of you, of when you were in the pandemic and you were having that chance where you were not able to share what you say is one of the loves of your life, how that affected you energetically. Because I know for me and a lot of people, it's a hard space of am I still valid? Well, when I come back, are they still going to want to hear my voice, or want me to work on their shows or whatever?
Yeah, well, you kind of get into like an identity crisis. I think, it's like, if a musician plays in the woods and the tree falls, doesn't make, you know what I'm saying? It's like, am I a musician if I'm not out there being a musician? And the answer, I think, is obviously yes.
Obviously.
You have to be. It's like, if it's in your consciousness and you're working through things, there's a lot, a lot of people who I know who went through the pandemic and just kind of put their instruments down.
Mm.
And I've talked to a lot of people like that now that like the work is really starting to come back. They're like, well, my chops are gone. I've got to kind of rebuild my playing. And I really felt for those people, because it's like, if they weren't feeling motivated to play, I think that, that's more a symptom of like feeling desperate, or feeling depressed, than it is like not wanting to play.
Right, because I would think playing would bring you joy. Like I saw so much more people creating their own content during the pandemic, which was like a nice, happy opposite side, where I was seeing people that I knew that were putting new, different content out there. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I didn't know that side of them. Or, and I'm wondering what you did, how you kept that kind of spark going. And obviously teaching was probably pivoted too, because you were doing it in person versus Zoom. So how did that energy shift?
Yeah, I started, once we realized that 2 weeks was not going to be the length of this thing, as we were told in the beginning. After that 2+ weeks was up, I kind of realized, I was like, okay, I've got to pivot this teaching thing. And the Zoom was starting to become such a buzzword.
Which I wish I bought stock in Zoom last January. I'm like kicking myself. I'm like, I should have bought stock in Zoom.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, I was like, well, obviously I got to start doing some virtual thing, which, ended up me having to, of course, I started doing that and my computer died, and, I had to replace a bunch of stuff. It was a mess. But anyway, it was another thing to climb, another mountain to climb, another thing to accomplish, another thing to get better at. because it was almost like starting teaching over, right? I remember I was talking about like, I'm not very good at this. This is frustrating. And that's how the Zoom thing felt in the beginning. It was just like so much of the time that I spent teaching previously is playing with people, together. And when you're out of time sync wise, you can't play together. And so I realized like, oh, I have a lot more time that I need to fill up with sheer instruction at this point, which kind of forced me to up my game in that regard. I had to get better. And again, it took time, it's still a work in progress. But I think in the end, it probably made me a little better at my craft.
Wow. So like there is a lag obviously in Zoom, but what you're saying is like it was so much of a lag that you couldn't like do it together the way you needed to
Yeah,
teach.
I mean,
Okay.
that's where the magic of music and an ensemble anyway is two people's or more's ability to sync up together and play music, and two people make sound, but it makes one sound together, right? And
Right.
if you can't have that sync, you can't have music in the way that we think of music, right? And I know that they do have some kind of like high bandwidth, types of services that do allow you to do that. And I never really went down that road. For whatever reason, I can't really tell you, but probably because every student would have to implement also, and it cost money and all that. So I think I just avoided it for that reason. But yeah, but now at this point, I've completely adapted to the virtual thing, and now people are happy about the virtual thing. And I was expecting to kind of have an exodus from it, but in fact, people have kind of stuck around. I think because they like the flexibility of it. It used to be when I was driving around town to people's homes, you kind of had to go on this day at this time, or I wasn't going to be able to get to you. But now it's like, okay, I'm open these days for this big swath of time each day. Whenever we can get it in, we can get it. If you have to cancel, we can dump you onto another day. And I think people are really into that, especially people, people have 2, 3 kids and there's sports and there's all this stuff that they're trying to juggle, and they love the flexibility of it. So I
Yeah,
think,
no, I think we're never going to see a change in the Zoom level. I think that it has revolutionized the way that we're able to teach now because I teach on Thursdays. I'm an assistant teacher for a dialects class, and I teach people privately as well for accents and dialects and voiceover work. And I found that I'm able to teach people from around the United States like
yeah,
easily. It's so great. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. I would have never met these wonderful human beings who are now like dearest friends. We're like a gang, you know?
yeah, it's like this like globalist world consciousness where like the geography is no longer an obstacle to meeting. And I guess this goes so far beyond teaching, right? Like, I mean, the ability to collaborate with people all around the world, musically or in film or any other way, is just amazing. We've never seen anything like this, and it's just starting. It's going to be amazing to kind of see where this leads us artistically over the next 5, 10, 20 years, right? Like, we're already creating art at a rate we never could have imagined
And they
50.
need it. They need it right now. Like you gave me affirmation bumps. Some people call them chill bumps, but I call them affirmation bumps because it means that when something is spoken in truth and it resonates with your highest soul's path, or you're kind of meeting each other energetically, you just gave me them because the rate in which people need art right now, it's so important. There's so much healing that this world has to do after everything we've seen in the last couple of years, from the hate crimes and the pandemic and just the divisiveness, that art is really truly, and I'm going to get emotional, it's the thing that brings us together, and
Yeah,
it's beautiful. It's so beautiful. Sorry,
no,
it makes me, because I love it so much. I love every aspect of storytelling, what you do, what anyone does. I just think it's so important to be an artist.
yeah, I agree with you 100%. I feel like we need art because we have war and depression and all of these kind of like negative forces that are kind of the story of humanity in a way, right? But it's like the further back you look into humanity, we find that art, I mean, it seems like every other week or every other month we found a new piece of art
Mhm.
that dates way earlier than the last, the oldest one we had found prior to that. And we find, and of course we find weapons and stuff right alongside it. So we find that these things have been running parallel for as far back as we care to look, right? All of these really nasty things about human nature are kind of baked into the cake also. But we've also got this icing of music and cave paintings, or I mean this stuff. I mean, there's theories that say that music is a predecessor to language.
Absolutely. And those cave paintings you're talking about, that's the very first form of storytelling. Those are your movies on the walls
Totally.
telling of, what happened in ancestors. And the only way that they could, let people know in generations to come, they didn't have necessarily the physical words maybe then, or maybe they did in some cultures, but they were able to at least depict what had happened so that people knew this is where you came from and this is where you're going. And that's just so beautiful to me. I just love looking at old architecture where it has those engravings and carvings. And I've gotten the honor to travel with my mother. She's 80 now, and she's traveled the world 5 times over. And I've gotten the privilege to go about 140 plus countries with her. And one of the things she always does is brings me to a museum, or brings me, to a place where art is formed, because it was just so important for her. And I love that.
Yeah, that's just amazing. Yeah, the opportunity to go check all of that out. That's lovely.
So cool. So when you were in the pandemic, did you hit a dip at all? Did you say, okay, I need to go and get a real job, or were you able to just keep it going, like just because of the ability to just teach, even because I know you didn't probably play out, or were you able to play out at some point?
I got super lucky. I through a, again, it's just like you kind of are connected to however many people you're connected to, and hopefully they can put you to work. Early on in May, I got a call to go do some work at a local restaurant, and ended up kind of roping a friend of mine, a great singer that I know, in to do this work with me. And they decided they wanted us twice a week. And we were able to do that kind of through the end of the year. And I'm still there one night a week. And then, my other types of gigs started to come back, and I was able to kind of phase that out and balance both. But it was just kind of one of those blessing moments where, it's so strange. It's like you almost feel guilty when things are so bad and some for everybody, and then something goes right for you. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, but you shouldn't see. Yeah, that's really interesting that you brought that up. And I'm kind of glad you did, because as artists, I think some people might be listening to this that are in the flow, and they stay in the flow, and they are sometimes have that survivor's remorse or that guilt factor that kind of creeps in, like, how do I deserve this? But no, you are absolutely in the flow for a reason. It's because you've brought down those heart walls. You brought, stripped away your self-limiting beliefs, and you were able to say, I'm worthy of this. I'm able to, give this as my gift. And in return, everything has to be given with an energy exchange. So energy neither creates or is destroyed. It just changes forms. And in our society, it's either barter or it is in the form of money. So that's the energy exchange. So that's you should never feel guilty about that, because that's your gift. That's what you are meant to bring.
Well, I appreciate that, and it's not that I wasn't just hyper grateful to be working, and kind of like the core of this conversation is just like I was able to keep my instrument in my hands, and I had a reason to pick the thing up every day, which is really everything. And that's really the story of my musical life. I mean, I can probably count on two hands the number of times since I started playing 20 years ago that a day has gone by where I haven't picked the thing up. I would be doing it if I wasn't being paid for it at all. It's
Right, right.
it's so weird. I go on vacation and I bring a guitar with me. It's like it doesn't feel like work. I mean, I can separate it. I can compartmentalize what parts of it are work, versus what parts of it are pure joy. But there's a lot of intermingling between those, right? Very rarely is it all work,
Well, and I think if you have so much joy for whatever you're doing, and it could be literally the joy of what my grandfather did, who's Scott's grandfather, and I call him my grandfather, Grandpa Paul, and he would deliver mail so happily every day to the town of Ironton. Everyone knew Paul as the happiest mailman. And so delivering that mail, even the simplest of tasks, but with joy and gratitude, just makes for a resplendent life. So if you find something that you can do and you have the joy in it, it's never work.
That is great. And I just want to say that The Happiest Mailman is like a children's book waiting to be written, right?
I
That
think it's probably already been written, but I might have to think about that. I have
you have the character inspiration.
I do.
I
I do.
encourage you to do it.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, actually, during the pandemic, to stay creative, my son Sawyer wanted to be a New York Times bestselling author. So in 5th grade, he did not get his 5th grade graduation, but instead we supported him. Got a wonderful artist who was a graduate from SCAD. He wrote a children's book called Piggy is Sad, and he got it on Amazon, and it's on Barnes and Noble, and now it's out there. So I am sort of a publisher now, or self-published. He did it.
Cool.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. So now I love that you bring a guitar with you wherever you go, because I think like vacations or holidays are just so energetically on a different level anyway. It's like you let all the cares go, and then to bring this like wonderful musical instrument. Crystal must be so lucky. You're just like sitting there on the beach and playing, or do people like come up to you guys? Are you like randomly out, or in your
Oh
apartment?
no, I don't usually take it in public. I just kind of have it at wherever we're staying.
Oh, okay.
And God bless my wife. I mean, it's mostly me practicing, the same 3 measures over and over again. It's like, I mean, sometimes
I
we'll,
just like imagine, you blew my whole thing. I was like imagining this wonderful serenade of Crystal by the beach in Navarre Beach or something.
oh sure. I mean, no, there is usually no shortage of drunken sing-alongs into the evenings. That's something that happens. But my personal attachment to the thing is this addiction I have to improvement. Right, the relationship between work and improvement, which is something that I got addicted to right away with music. The reality is that you put some time in, and then you're better, and
Yeah.
and if you keep it up, you get to keep those gains.
Yes, those small wins avalanche into big wins again. I always say that. And I think that's so true for actors too. Just to stay in a class, to stay
Yes.
totally active all the time. Even if you're getting together with 3 friends, find 3 friends today and be like, let's do a Zoom improv session where we're just improving, even if we can't get together in person. And I think that's just so important. That's so great.
Keep your chops up and grow in every moment. It's just the most amazing thing. And the longer you do it, the harder you have to work to get incrementally better, right? But it's still worth it in my mind. The work, there's always this positive relationship between the work and the gains.
Yeah. Peter Sage, who is one of the online mentors I'm listening to a lot right now, and I'll mention him quite a bit in these podcasts because I'm just fascinated. He really goes into the science of brain inertia and cell inertia. And so to get from like this point of never running before versus up here of doing a marathon, or staying on the couch, going down to this way, if you look at the graph going up and the graph going down, it's so much easier to take small incremental steps to get up to that marathon versus trying to do it when you're kind of sort of finally motivated right down here, but you've been on the couch so long, and then to jump from there to there, the brain cell inertia doesn't work in that way. But just small actionable steps every day or every week, be it walking 1 quarter of a mile, even whatever you can do, it's really neat how the brain works that way.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's also indicative of this phenomenon where in the early days you can make the biggest gains without having to put in as much, right? And running might not be the best analogy there, but there's I mean, a lot of, artistic pursuits are kind of like this, where like you can go from 0 to 20 pretty quickly. To get from 20 to 40 might take a lot longer, and then to get from 40 to 60, I mean, it's just going to be diminishing returns. But to kind of wake up your talent and wake up this kind of like slumbering artist within you it's not as hard as you think, right? Like buy the colored pencils and the pad, right? Like buy the starter guitar, right? I don't know what if there is an acting equivalent of these things, but just get started, right?
Yeah, I think the acting equivalent is just, taking time to either get together or taking that first class to kind of work on the different areas that you can excel in, that when you are on set or you're in an audition, you can be this solving their problem. That's all casting wants. That's all these shows want. They want something to come in and solve their problem. And they have a lot of different problems that they need to solve. Everyone, you say, oh, well, I'm not a match for any of these problems. Yeah, you will be. You will be because you're needed. You're special. You're meant to be here on Earth. You right there listening now are meant to be here on Earth for a reason. And you have amazing gifts to give. Maybe you just haven't tapped into them yet. And hopefully this podcast will maybe get you there, get you to take that small actionable step that you need to take.
Yeah, 100%.
I love it. This has been so lovely, Seth. I know you need to get onto a class here again shortly, but I just wanted to thank you so much for just delving deep into kind of some of the mindset that took you from such a good, place to a great place where you're just living it. You're living that joy. And now, if I can just ask you this thing that I ask everyone, what would you say to your 20-year-old self?
It's going to be okay.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because at 20, there's just so much going on.
Well, and you never know which way is up, and you don't know who you are or who you want to be, or like we talked about earlier, what my family is expecting of me, etc. It's like it's all going to work out,
And also, what would you tell yourself 20 years down the road? If you were to talk to yourself right now, you're 20 years down the road, what would you say?
Oh, wow. That's a tough question. That's a lot harder question to answer. Because I don't know what's going to happen in the next 20 years. Gosh, that's really tough. I hope it ended up being okay.
That works. I love it.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is great. I love that we were able to connect this way. And can people find you, like for lessons and find like where you're playing? Do you have some type of blog that you do, or how can people stay in touch with you?
Unfortunately, my internet presence is pretty null. But I do have an email address, and that's buckheadmusiclessons@gmail.com. And that's not just for teaching inquiries. That can be just for any thoughts or questions or anything at all. It's just a good way to reach out.
Excellent. And then maybe I'll get up with you to get that PDF for people who are musicians, that maybe they can figure out a way that they can actionably step hustling those gigs from places in town.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure all the numbers and names have changed, but the idea is the same.
Yeah, that's fine. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Seth. We really appreciate you, and I hope to hear you live soon.
No, thank you so much for having me. This has really been a pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to Undetoured, Navigating the Artist Journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and subscribe and leave a 5-star review. And please check out our other episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And in return, my gift to you is a short, invigorating meditation to get your day started. You can find its link, along with other links to Undetoured, in this episode's description. Undetoured, Navigating the Artist Journey was produced by Cabot Basden of Say What Sound Studio and hosted by Sloan Warren.